Enzo Rossi, an Italian prisoner of war in the Arizona desert, was starving, and his desperation pushed him to steal the one thing he was forbidden to touch: a ripe orange. When the American farmer caught him red-handed, the punishment Enzo expected was severe. But what happened next defied every terrifying lie his regime had told him, shattering his world with a single, unexpected act of mercy. The year was 1943, and the American Southwest was a furnace. The barbed wire of the Florence prisoner of war camp in Arizona shimmered under a sun so merciless, it seemed to pull the moisture right out of a man's bones, leaving only dust and desperation. Private Enzo Rossi, a young Italian artilleryman, was battling an enemy far more relentless than any Allied soldier: hunger. The regime he had served had painted a clear and terrifying picture of America. Propaganda warned that captured soldiers would be treated with brutal contempt, starved, and worked until their bodies ceased to function. Enzo believed it. He expected malice and degradation. The stories whispered in the barracks focused on the worst possible fates, making his anticipation of cruelty a daily certainty. This relentless fear, coupled with the constant physical deprivation, was designed to utterly break the spirit of the enemy soldier. Every day was a battle to suppress the fear that the quiet, uniformed men watching him were simply waiting to inflict cruelty. The daily routine was numbing: wake up, line up, eat just enough to keep going, and march out for labor. The American guards rarely spoke, which Enzo took as a bad sign. The heat was a constant crushing presence, and the wind was dry and unforgiving. The only things that felt real were the burning sun and the hollow ache in his gut. His greatest struggle was holding on to memory, visualizing the colors and flavors of home. One afternoon, assigned to clean debris near the camp property, Enzo saw something that shattered the gray uniformity of his existence. Beyond the low fence, where the desert met an irrigation canal, stretched acres of impossible green, a citrus grove. The trees were dark and heavy with fruit. He saw not just trees, but oranges, vivid spheres of gold and life, packed with the moisture his body desperately craved. The rules were clear. Consumption of the crops was strictly prohibited. It was a cruel irony, working so close to such abundance while suffering from lack. The physical craving was amplified by the moral certainty that one small act of theft could cost him everything, yet the overwhelming need for vitamins and sugar made the consequence seem abstract. That brief glimpse ignited a dangerous, consuming desire in Enzo. He knew stealing was unthinkable, but as he wiped the sweat from his eyes and stared at the shimmering gold, the hunger and the fear began to merge into a single, desperate intention. Tomorrow the picking detail would begin at the edge of that orchard, and Enzo knew, with a certainty that both terrified and exhilarated him, that he would be close enough to touch the impossible fruit. The Italian prisoners had seen many miles of America, but nothing prepared them for the defiant impossibility of the citrus grove. The trucks rolled past the final, rusted stretch of wire and into a world of vibrant green, a baffling contradiction to the desert. It was here that Enzo Rossi was about to encounter the quiet, unsettling reality of American abundance. The air itself didn't taste of dust, but of sweetness and humidity. The trees, row after endless row, were bowed under the weight of thousands of oranges, a bounty that felt indecent given the scarcity Enzo knew had afflicted his homeland. This effortless wealth, produced by a machine of agriculture, was the most unnerving thing of all. The sheer volume of marketable fruit suggested a society operating on a scale of industrial might. Enzo could barely comprehend a power rooted in peaceful production rather than military conquest. Waiting for them was Silas Kincaid, the man who owned the land. Silas wasn't a soldier. He was a farmer. He wore denim overalls and a dusty baseball cap. He didn't shout commands. His voice was slow, flat, and focused entirely on logistics. His authority was unsettling because it stemmed from competence, not military rank, a concept entirely alien to Enzo's military mind. He saw prisoners only as hired labor. "Need 'em in the back 40 today. Navals are ready." To Enzo, this silent efficiency felt profoundly menacing. Silas's pragmatism, His view of the prisoners merely as an additional temporary labor source was entirely foreign. The guards gave strict instructions: work cleanly, follow Silas's directions, and do not touch the produce. Any violation meant harsh consequences. The prohibition was torture. They were immersed in a sea of life-giving fruit, yet forbidden to consume it. The injustice of the forced starvation amidst such plenty was a heavy, constant psychological weight, gnawing at his resolve and demanding satisfaction. Enzo's stomach gave a painful spasm. The orange was a symbol of everything he lacked. The farmer's face, when it passed close to Enzo, was impassive. This indifference was all the license Enzo needed. He told himself that one fruit was insignificant against the thousands they would pick. The hunger, the heat, and the overwhelming scent of citrus dissolved his fear into a desperate, singular focus. The sheer volume of fruit, piled everywhere and glinting under the hot western sun, created an internal moral hazard far greater than any order given by a guard. As Enzo took his first step into the deep shaded rows, the scent of the ripe fruit promised a forbidden relief, silently mocking the strict laws of the camp and drawing him toward the inevitable moment of his desperate gamble. Standing deep within the citrus rows, Enzo Rossi found that his internal battlefield was intense. His focus had narrowed entirely onto the fruit, those perfect, glowing spheres representing private rebellion against his endless captivity. It was here that his fear began to lose its hold to a burning obsession. He was assigned to a picking team, cutting the fruit and gently placing it into the heavy canvas sacks. Every orange he touched was cool and firm, radiating the promise of sweet juice. His training as a soldier was now utterly failing him. His mind, starved of simple pleasure, could calculate nothing but the minimal risk of securing one single orange. The smooth, round perfection of the fruit felt like a direct insult to his current degraded state, fueling a need for defiance. The rules were clear, and the consequence of discovery was crushing. Yet Enzo's hunger was an absolute command. He watched the bored American guards. He observed the rhythm of their patrols and noted the exact moment they drifted into listlessness. The sheer monotony of the work was, ironically, his greatest ally in planning the theft. A single orange wasn't trouble. It was invisible. The sensory details of the grove amplified the temptation. The thick leaves offered deceptive privacy. As he emptied his picking sack into a waiting crate, Enzo calculated the perfect moment. The rhythmic clip, clip, clip of the shears, the momentary distraction of the prisoners, the time it took the guard to scratch his neck. It was a soldier's assessment of vulnerability. He thought of the tales the propaganda had spun. Stealing, in that context, was a minor skirmish. The sheer volume of the harvest mocked him. What difference could one make? The question was rhetorical, but the answer felt like salvation. The desperate need for sugar and hydration was a siren call he could no longer ignore, promising temporary freedom from suffering and a defiance of his captors, however small. He decided he would wait until the transition, the chaotic moment when the crews gathered their tools at sundown. He needed the juice, the sugar, the tangible reality of the fruit to remind him that life still held moments of flavor. The internal debate was over. Enzo's need had eclipsed his fear, and as the afternoon drew to its close, he felt a heart-pounding resolve settle over him. He was ready to pay the high price for one moment of pure, stolen sweetness, and he only needed the shadows of sundown to execute the desperate, quiet action. The sun was dissolving into the Arizona horizon, and in the deepening shadows, Enzo Rossi's terror mingled with adrenaline. This was the window. This was the moment of transition when the guards were weary, and the low light made every shadow a potential hiding place. He moved with the quiet stealth of a man trained for night operations. His comrades were lining up for the count, their backs turned. Enzo deliberately took the long route, feigning exhaustion. His heart hammered against his ribs. He slid into the darkest aisle where the scent of rich soil masked his presence. The air felt thick and charged, like the final seconds before a command is given and the wires are cut, making his own heart seem deafeningly loud. In one swift, nervous motion, he twisted 3 oranges from the stem, dropping them into his pockets. The weight of the stolen fruit felt enormous. He held his breath, listening for a shout. The silence that followed was deafening, confirming the successful execution of his small crime. He allowed himself one brief internal sigh of relief before the guilt set in. The theft had been successful. Now came the second, more dangerous step, getting back to the line. He marched quickly toward the assembling group, feeling the absurd joy of his small triumph. As the column began its slow march, Enzo retrieved the first orange. He needed to consume the evidence immediately. He peeled the tough skin slowly. The oil from the rind burst onto his fingers, instantly intoxicating. He placed the first slice, cold and wet, onto his tongue. It was a revelation. It was acidic, vibrant, and alive, flooding his mouth with a flavor so pure it instantly eclipsed the memory of bland rations. He devoured the fruit quickly. It was a greedy, overwhelming rush of pure, vital relief, followed instantly by a sharp wave of guilt and a renewed fear of discovery. But the taste was worth the risk. He swallowed the last segment. He was reaching for the second orange when the entire column halted. A shadow fell over him. Enzo looked up, and his blood ran cold. Standing less than 3 feet away, blocking the path, was the imposing figure of Silas Kincaid. The farmer had simply been waiting. His face was impossible to read. He didn't need to speak. He simply stood there, and Enzo, with orange juice still glistening on his chin, realized he was caught. The brief, sharp pleasure of the stolen fruit vanished instantly, replaced by paralyzing fear. Enzo dropped the 2 remaining oranges, which rolled with a soft, incriminating thud into the dust, and braced himself for the savage reprisal his propaganda-fueled mind had always assured him was coming. The moment lasted an eternity. Enzo Rossi stood immobilized, facing the silent, immense figure of the farmer, Silas Kincaid. This was the reckoning his terrified heart had been bracing for. Enzo's mind raced through the rehearsed fears. He lifted his palms in a gesture of surrender. His voice, weak, managed a single whisper in Italian. Mi dispiace. I am sorry. He closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable fury. He fully expected to feel the sudden, agonizing impact of American hatred, a final confirmation of the Reich's lies and the crushing of his dignity. But nothing happened. The silence deepened, broken only by Enzo's ragged breathing. The unbearable weight of the farmer's quiet gaze was a psychological instrument, far more terrifying and effective than any immediate physical punishment could have been. When he dared to open his eyes, the terror intensified. Silas Kincaid simply stood there. He wasn't yelling, wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was just looking down at the discarded oranges, then at Enzo's face. The suspense was agonizing. Enzo found himself wishing for the pain, anything to break the unbearable weight of this quiet, stoic confrontation. Then, slowly, Silas Kincaid shifted. He rubbed the back of his neck, and a strange sound escaped him. It grew into a genuine, rolling laugh. It was the most astonishing and subversive sound Enzo had heard since the war began, defying logic and expectation, a sound that undercut all his deeply held ideological fears and shook the very foundation of his captivity. It was a loud, unforced sound of amusement, completely devoid of malice. Enzo was paralyzed by confusion. The farmer was laughing. This was not in the script. Enzo had prepared for contempt, but not this baffling, unexpected moment. Silas Kincaid took a single step forward, and the laughing faded into a soft chuckle. He spoke in a voice that was calm and slow. He gestured not toward the camp, but toward the stacks of newly picked fruit. The anticipated blow never came. Instead, the man who held absolute power over Enzo's immediate fate simply chuckled, shook his head as if dismissing a small child's foolishness, and then, in the deepening gloom of the Arizona evening, he pointed toward the incredible, overflowing abundance that filled the crates. The laughter faded, and the question that hung between the farmer and the Italian prisoner was about decency. Silas Kincaid, still chuckling, picked up the 2 dropped oranges, rubbing the dirt off their skins before handing them back. This gesture, granting the stolen fruit back, was more confusing than any display of rage could have been. Silas finally spoke. "Son," he said, "if you were hungry, Why didn't you just ask?" Enzo could only stare. Silas walked past him, sliced the metal band securing a crate, and gestured at the prisoner. "Take it," Silas said. "Take the whole box." He pushed the entire weight of American abundance into Enzo's hands, an act that felt revolutionary compared to the scarcity Enzo had known his entire adult life, reversing the power dynamic entirely. The words hit Enzo. He braced himself, certain this was a trick, but there was nothing, just the farmer's calm, patient gaze. Silas was giving him abundance where the Nazi and fascist regimes preached scarcity, making the lie of their propaganda inescapable and forcing a moral reckoning. Silas Kincaid wasn't acting out of sentimentality. He was operating on pragmatic decency. He needed productive workers. By this radical act, he shamed Enzo for stealing and bound him with an overwhelming sense of obligation. Enzo was forced to confront a reality that contradicted his propaganda. As he struggled to lift the heavy crate, Silas rested a large hand on his shoulder. "Keep it straight," the farmer advised. "And tomorrow, you work hard to pay for it." The debt was moral. Enzo had been prepared to fight a cruel master, but not to serve a decent one. This act of quiet kindness was a lesson in dignity, taught in an Arizona orange grove. He realized Silas had respected him enough to offer a contract based on honor, not chains, a debt that could only be repaid through honest labor and restored personal worth. Clutching the heavy wooden crate to his chest, Enzo stumbled toward the waiting trucks. He had been given a chance to repay dignity with dignity. As the truck rattled back toward the barbed wire, Enzo knew the true war, the war against his own prejudices, had just begun. The truck rattled back toward the barbed wire perimeter, carrying a single heavy wooden crate of oranges. Enzo Rossi sat gripping the box. He had returned not as a punished thief, but as a puzzled ambassador of unbelievable American mercy. When the group shuffled into the barracks, every eye fixed on the crate. Whispers immediately spread. Is it a test? The sudden fragrant presence of such riches felt like an alien invasion of their regulated hunger, creating instant chaos that the guards did little to quell. It was a literal taste of forbidden freedom. Enzo, still reeling from the farmer's laughter, could barely speak. He just gestured toward the box. His friend, Guido, lifted the lid, and the barracks were instantly flooded with the sharp, sweet fragrance. The men tore into the oranges. The sensory feast was the first real pleasure they had known in months, and a powerful, delicious refutation of the propaganda that had sustained them. The event marked Enzo. He was the man who had received unbelievable mercy. His fear of the guards had been replaced by a crushing sense of obligation. He felt shame for his petty theft and an intense need to repay Silas Kincaid. His new purpose was to honor the farmer's trust with absolute dedication, channeling his desperation into honest work that restored his sense of self. This feeling quickly translated into action. The next morning, Enzo worked with a relentless, almost manic energy. He was focused, disciplined, and utterly devoted to picking the fruit cleanly. Enzo's dedication was born of gratitude. For the other Italian prisoners, Enzo's story became the new secret truth. They began to question the rigid beliefs they had held about the American monsters. The simple, heavy crate of oranges had done more to dismantle enemy ideology than any leaflet could have achieved. It was a quiet, powerful form of psychological warfare based entirely on human decency and the shocking abundance of a confident nation, proving their ideology hollow. The guilt-driven devotion that fueled Enzo Rossi's labor became a silent contract with Silas Kincaid, a promise of dignity for dignity, work for mercy. As the days blurred into weeks under the endless Arizona sun, Enzo worked harder than ever, trying to earn his way back from the shame of his theft and quietly building an entirely new understanding of the man he was supposed to loathe. The daily rhythm of the orange grove was a profound, quiet lesson. The obligation Enzo felt toward Silas Kincaid transformed into an earnest apprenticeship, built on respect rather than fear. Enzo's reputation shifted to the hardest worker. Silas responded to Enzo's devotion with slow, deliberate instruction. He would pause near Enzo's row, offering simple wisdom about the soil or pruning. The relationship bypassed language and rank, resting solely on the quality of the work. Enzo absorbed every word, realizing this knowledge was the true currency of the new world, a world built on competence and fairness. Enzo learned the principles of sustainable abundance. Silas taught him that the health of the grove depended on nurture. This was a system built on accountability and honest work, a far cry from the fear-driven inefficiency he had witnessed under his own collapsing regime. He saw that true wealth came from planning and respecting the natural order, not from conquest, a philosophical reversal of everything he had been taught by Mussolini's regime. One scorching afternoon, Silas found Enzo working. He selected a ripe orange and sliced it in half, handing one half to Enzo. "Thirsty?" Silas asked. Enzo froze. This time he was being offered the fruit as a shared reward for hard work. He consumed it slowly. The taste was better than the frantic stolen pleasure. The shame was gone, replaced by pride. This simple act, the farmer sharing his own fruit openly, was the final confirmation that the boundary of fear had vanished. Enzo was a valuable human being, entrusted with the care of the land. He realized he had earned Silas's respect not as a soldier, but as a man who could honor a debt, granting him a personal freedom he hadn't known even when he was free. The lesson was complete. True power lay not in enforcing strict rules, but in granting trust. As the sun began to set, casting long familiar shadows across the ordered rows of fruit, Enzo realized the soil of America had taught him a patience and a dignity that would change the entire harvest of his life, a knowledge he knew he would carry home and plant in the ruins of his homeland. April 1945. The wind across the Arizona groves carried the dust of finality. Enzo Rossi knew his time was ending. The war was swiftly reaching its bitter conclusion. The news brought conflicting emotion, relief, but also cold anxiety. What kind of home awaited them? Enzo was assigned to the last picking crew with Silas Kincaid. The work that day was quiet, heavy with unspoken farewells. The months of shared labor had created a solemn, undeniable kinship. More real than the conflict that brought them together, a bond built on soil and mutual respect. The bond between the two men was forged by shared labor, a stolen orange, and a returned sense of dignity. Enzo spent the morning packing the final crates. He realized he wasn't just leaving a labor assignment, he was leaving a strange kind of shelter. He was leaving healthier, wiser, and armed with a new, profound understanding of the enemy's moral code. That afternoon, the army trucks arrived. Enzo broke away and approached Silas, who was leaning against the packing shed. Enzo's English was rudimentary. "Mr. Kincaid," he began, "thank you for work, for asking." Silas nodded. He knew the debt Enzo carried. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of wood. Enzo, in turn, produced a small, smooth, hand-carved wooden token, a cypress tree. He held it out. "For good luck, signore," he offered. It was the only meaningful possession he had left, a physical symbol of his profound gratitude for the man's faith in him. Silas took the token. "Go home," the farmer said. "Go home and build something good with what you learned here. That's all the payment I need." His words were a command for the future, not a simple farewell to the past, urging Enzo to become a force for reconstruction and carry the honor of the grove with him. Enzo realized the true significance of the orange crate. It had saved him from the corrosive lie of hate. He had witnessed a nation so confident in its principles that it could afford to be kind to its enemies. As Enzo boarded the truck, the cypress token was safely tucked into his pocket. He looked back at Silas Kincaid, whose silhouette stood framed by the endless rows of oranges, and whispered that the war had truly ended for him the moment he encountered a farmer's laugh instead of a guard's fist, a knowledge he knew would guide him through the ruins of his homeland and reshape his entire life's purpose, a priceless lesson of humanity earned in captivity. The journey home was long and slow, but when Enzo Rossi finally stepped off the troop train in 1947, he carried an invisible, powerful seed of optimism. He started a new life based on the principle Silas Kincaid had taught him: abundance through organization. He began small, renting a stall in the market specializing in citrus, a direct homage to the orchard that had saved his soul. Enzo's stall quickly became known for the unparalleled freshness of his product and the unusual courtesy with which he conducted business. He treated every customer with fairness. He ran his operation based on Silas's principles of quality control and zero-waste logistics. This adherence to efficiency and honesty set his shop apart immediately, earning him the trust and loyalty of his community and proving the value of the American lesson in every transaction. When a customer was short on cash, he often offered a small generosity. "Where did you learn such patience?" people would ask. Enzo would simply smile and say, "In America, from a farmer." Years later, his stall grew into a successful fruit shop. Above the counter, Enzo hung a framed photograph, the cypress token resting against dried orange rind. The moral scar was the realization that he had been completely wrong about the enemy. The truth he learned in the Arizona heat was now the bedrock of his prosperity and his character, a personal reconstruction in a broken land, flourishing where others struggled with bitterness. The true moment of closure came unexpectedly, decades later. Enzo received an envelope from Arizona. It contained a letter from Silas Kincaid's daughter. Inside the package was a pair of old, worn leather work gloves. Enzo held them, the smell instantly transporting him back to the farm. The gloves were a final affirmation of Silas's simple, powerful message: that worth is measured by work, and honor is returned with trust. Enzo continued his life, his shop a living symbol of reconciliation. Historians acknowledge that thousands of former Axis prisoners returned to Europe with stories not of brutality, but of unexpected, humane treatment. These former POWs became the first vital human bridges between the warring nations. Enzo Rossi lived out his life as a quiet testament to the enduring power of mercy, proving that the greatest victories in history are often won not by armies but by the simple, subversive goodness of an ordinary man. He carried the spirit of the orange grove with him always, knowing that the greatest freedom he had found was the freedom from hate, gifted to him by a laughing farmer in the middle of a desert. The kindness shown in that citrus grove changed not just one soldier's life, but the relationship between two nations. If this story of dignity and transformation earned your respect, please hit the like button and subscribe to uncover more unbelievable true moments from history.